In the exact same way I made my top 10 manga series of all time, now it's my top 10 manga protagonists of all time. So jumping straight into number 10, I have Saitama from One Punch Man. Now fortunately, a lot of people know that his character, it's not as simple and surface level as he seems. He's actually a very complex and compelling character with a good amount of struggle. He's just the literal personifications of what it means to be lonely at the top. Saitama lost all joy in life once he started losing all of his competition, and the only real emotions we see from him now are just little moments. You might see a little bit when he's interacting with King, especially playing the game, but that only brings so much satisfaction. And the author does an amazing job utilizing him within the story. Saitama does get sidelined a lot, but this, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't really matter. It's not only giving other characters time to shine, but by the end, Saitama comes back at the climax of the story to steal the show completely. Just huge props to the author for not only crafting an amazing protagonist, but utilizing him well within the story. At number 9, I have a character that's much less known, and that's Akira Hojo from the manga Sanctuary. You can definitely tell what era of manga he came from just by the way that he acts. Hojo has seemingly endless charisma, and add that on with an unwavering dedication to his beliefs, and you already have a good foundation for an amazing protagonist. Now to make this real spicy, make him the head of the Yakuza in a political manga. Now unfortunately, the author does drop the ball in multiple areas in this manga, and Akira Hojo suffers as a protagonist because of it. But even with all those downsides, I still think he's well deserving as the number 9 spot on my list. At number 8, I have a character that's very well known but downplayed a lot, and that's Rock from Black Lagoon. And the reason people downplay him, it makes sense. He's a Japanese businessman self-insert, and that's not the most creative of protagonists, but still I think he's well executed, and how he changes over time just makes his character so satisfying. And a big reason for that is the fact that he has a negative character arc. Most characters go through the positive arc, where they basically just make positive changes. And to oversimplify the negative character arc, basically he becomes a worse person. And I really like how this is done with Rock's character. It's very subtle, done over a long period of time, and we still have a long ways to go. He has become what he's become because of the situation he got thrown into and the people surrounding him. Rock as a protagonist is just somebody that deserves a lot more credit. At number 7, I have something that's going to piss a lot of people off, and that's why I'm excited to talk about it. And that's of course Guts from Berserk. Now in reality, he's really on here because I haven't read enough of Berserk. I've only read up until the end of the Golden Age arc, but from what I hear, that's the best arc and the best arc for his character. I can definitely see both Guts and Griffith becoming pretty aimless as the manga goes on. Of course, that's just a baseless guess. The only thing that I've seen outside of the Golden Age arc is the 2016 anime, and we all know how that was. But his character arc in the Golden Age arc was no less than fantastic, and maybe I would have rated him higher if I would have only read the Golden Age arc and not the Black Swordsman arc as well. Not only do I just don't think that the Black Swordsman arc is any good at all, but I also don't think Guts was good in this arc. For the longest time, this arc did put the idea in my mind that Guts and Berserk was just edgy garbage. But right after that, I get hit with one of the better arcs in manga, and at the same time making Guts an actually really interesting protagonist. But going back to before when I talked about being edgy, at number 6, I have Kaneki from Tokyo Ghoul. Now Kaneki gets a really bad rap because of the Hot Topic fan base, but he's genuinely one of the most compelling characters out there. And had it not been for Tokyo Ghoul Ree's narrative tomfoolery there towards the end, Kaneki would probably be even higher. Another good point of criticism for Kaneki as a character is that all of his changes are pretty instantaneous. Remember what I said about Rock earlier, where I said that he had a very slow and satisfying character arc? This doesn't really apply to Kaneki, but that can be pretty easily dismissed by the extreme situations that Kaneki is put in time and time again. His first transformation was after being tortured by Jason for 10 days, both mentally and physically. And I do think that Kaneki, like Tokyo Ghoul, was inspired by both Guts and Berserk. And of course, Guts is given the nickname the Struggler, and I think that definitely applies to Kaneki as well. But I think at the end of the day, you can say that both Kentaro Miura and Ishida Sui prove that you can really torture your character to greatness. Fitting within the same book but just a different chapter is at number 5, Kurunoke from Gantz. Now he's definitely a struggler just like Kaneki in Guts, but he's definitely a lot different than both of them. I mean, Guts is an asshole and Kaneki was a genuinely good guy, but Kuruno on the other hand, he was just a fucking degenerate. He was pretty indifferent about everything and only ever really thought about titties. But of course, he does go through some incredible change throughout the entire manga. And a lot of people don't like the ending, but at the same time, I don't think it really matters when talking about his character because it doesn't really affect his character arc at all. But seeing him go from a degenerate, like I said before, to an actually good person is one of the most satisfying character arcs out there. And while that was a really huge change in character, I don't think it really has anything on number 4, and that's of course Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan. Now, it's important to note that his arc isn't finished yet, and he could easily go up to number 3 or drop down to even out of the top 10 depending on how the series ends. I really don't see him breaking the top 2 though. Mostly everything that makes his character great now is just how his ideals have changed and how he goes about doing things. But I'm gonna choose to avoid the spoilers for now. And Eren's being hyped up a lot right now, and I think it's genuinely deserved. I guess it is possible that it's influencing my decision to place him at number 4, but I don't really think it's that outlandish to place him here. I've messed with the placings a couple of times, but he's pretty much stayed in the same spot throughout each time I've changed the list, and it just doesn't feel right ranking him any higher or lower. At number 3, I have Yato from Noragami. Now, I can definitely see some people being baffled by this, especially if they've only seen the first 2 seasons, but the story does go significantly beyond that, and I'm pretty sure Noragami as a series is approaching its endgame. At the same time, Yato's character arc has pretty much come full circle. The theme of self-confidence has been relevant throughout the entire series, and there's almost endless lessons you can pull from it. Overall, I do think people really do enjoy Yato as a character, but I don't think he's given the credit he deserves when it comes to just character writing in general. Heading on to number 2 is Thorfinn from Vinland Saga, and he's a pretty decent step down from my number 1, and it's only for one reason really. He seemingly just adopts every single philosophy Thor's had, and here's where a little bit of personal preference might come in the way. I prefer it when characters are essentially crafted by their surroundings. I'm not saying there's not any of that with Thorfinn, but he essentially just becomes another Thor's. I would have rather him take different things from different people and different situations as time went on, but still both narratively and thematically Thorfinn's character makes complete sense, and I don't have to love Thorfinn to acknowledge the quality in his writing. His changing character from the war arc to the slave arc was an insane twist. Add that on with the amount of change he went through during the slave arc and how those changes in ideals would change in the arcs following. Add all of that together and you get, in my opinion, the second best written protagonist in all of manga. Given my top 10 manga list, it shouldn't be any surprise, but at number 1 I have Musashi from Vagabond. Not a single character I've ever seen in any form of entertainment even comes close. I'm bugging a little bit, there are some that come close, but still Musashi's my number 1. And don't get me wrong, Takehiko in no way had so many advantages just on the concept of the manga alone. It follows the story of Miyamoto Musashi, the most legendary duelist in all of Japan. On top of being just a legendary warrior in general, he's also a very notable philosopher. And to oversimplify the book that he wrote, he basically gave a how-to on how to become him. On top of all this historic material, there was a novel which the manga is loosely based on, and a movie that was based on that same novel. If I had to guess, I'd make the assumption that Takehiko in no way had a pretty good idea of what he was going to do with Musashi well before he wrote the story. But knowing what to do is one thing, and in no way, in my opinion, executed it almost perfectly. Vagabond is packed with a lot of action, but at the same time, it has a lot of moments of calmness. And this really helps to showcase both sides of Miyamoto Musashi. The action, of course, showing his prowess as a warrior, and the calmer moments, of course, showing his prowess as a philosopher. And one of my favorite aspects of this manga is how Musashi progresses. The man is just naturally strong and skilled, so there's not really any battle shown in training montages. The calmer and more philosophical moments directly lead to him improving as a warrior. There's just so much you can take away from Vagabond as a series, and more specifically Musashi as a character.